So we do have breaking news involving Hunter Biden. If you're not following the news while you're also watching our broadcast live, Hunter Biden has decided to plead guilty in that tax case out of California, which I think was hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. He ultimately had someone, a friend, pay those taxes, back taxes for him. But instead of going to trial, he is going to plead not guilty. This would set up a much easier way, I think, for his father, the president of the United States, to issue a pardon on his way out, because the case, even though he could do it now, and he could do it even if Hunter was in the middle of a trial, it would have already worked its way through. There might be a penalty phase of this, but they've obviously believed with whatever plea deal they've come up with, it's not going to involve any kind of jail time. I don't think they would have agreed to any plea like that. So Hunter Biden starting to also clean up and kind of shut down his legal issues because his father's on the way out, and on the way out, a lot easier if you're not up for re-election to issue pardons to family members, and I think Hunter will be at the top of the list. No surprise there. I don't think it'll be a big part of the election because Joe Biden is no longer, other than the policies that Kamala Harris was a part of, Joe Biden himself and these kind of personal decisions are really kind of taken off the field by taking him off the field of the actual election. And I think, by next week and the debate, and maybe the only debate we get next on the 10th, I think that the issues are going to be the issues that affect the American people. I don't think even the case out of D.C. by then, even if on some crazy timeline, is going to be something the American people are paying much attention to when they decide who they want to be president of the United States. I mean, if President Trump wins, these cases fall apart. If he loses, I think the cases fall apart as well. It's like you don't have a stomach to continue to prosecute a former president if he lost a second election cycle. If he does win, all he has to do is instruct the Department of Justice to drop these cases. And everybody expects that to be the case. I don't think there would be any surprise there that would be done. But the fact is that until that moment, the DOJ is trying to politicize their role as much as possible. So I think with moving forward with the superseding indictment as quickly as they could, even though the Supreme Court slapped them down so hard, to try and get back into court like they did today, get the not guilty plea again from President Trump on this superseding indictment. They've already gotten that once on the initial indictment and rewriting it. And then the Merrick Garland coming out with the Russia again and having, Russian disinformation coming through, I guess, websites, and they're supposed to look real, but they aren't real, and they're trying to mislead American voters. It's the exact same playbook. They are restarting it once again.
That's right. And in this case, as we mentioned earlier, Judge Chutkan is the one who's going to have to be the arbiter of some of these immunity issues. We know that the Supreme Court gave feels like very strong guidelines about what many of those are, many of them outright. They were like, if it was a conversation with someone that is in this department in the executive branch, that's immune. But there are some of the other issues that she's going to have to parse out. And the attorney here for President Trump, John Lauro, he's actually asking for an evidentiary hearing because Judge Chutkan said immunity needs to be dealt with as early as possible. And he wants a full and robust record on that early. So that's what people refer to almost as like the mini trial. It's where the prosecution has to bring forward and kind of present their evidence to the judge so that she can make decisions on what's allowed and what's not allowed. So that is something, though, that we'll find out when she sets this schedule, maybe even later today, but whether or not that's something that could happen before the election. If there's an evidentiary hearing where Jack Smith has to go in there and kind of lay everything out on the table, and the judge then needs to parse out what things are allowed and not allowed based off the immunity ruling of the Supreme Court, we could see something like that if the judge in this case, is wanting an accelerated timeline to try to get this going, because she opened the court this hearing today with almost a joke of, "Oh, I haven't seen you guys in a while. You're looking good," because it's been nearly a year because of the Supreme Court's action on this case that put everything on hold since really late last year. So even that, the judge was kind of making a joke to try to crack the ice, break the ice a little bit as they came back into court for the first time in many, many months.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think what you're honestly looking at here is probably the next most interesting thing as we're going through the Trump legal world is back in New York. It's again that the Judge McCann, the sentencing date, which is on the 18th. So that's right in the middle of, you're talking about 8 days after the first debate. This, again, I think all of that will be appealed. None of that's going to go into effect immediately. And in fact, that could even be delayed as of right now. So I don't know if that 18th date will stand. We will see. A lot of people thought it would not. But many conservatives believe that Merchan is also politically motivated and wants to issue a guilty plea and kind of cause chaos pre-election and maybe even try, and that's what they're saying, even try to issue some kind of prison sentence for Donald Trump. So again, I think it's a time not to get too distracted. We want to update you on all of this, of course, because it's coming back, and of course with Hunter Biden trying to close out some of his legal woes. I think because of where his dad stands now, not seeking re-election, get the legal cases finished, and get the pardons, and ultimately whatever plea deals you've made and whatever decisions, probably anything there, it gets wiped out. So he's doing that. Donald Trump, on the other hand, I think if you're the Trump campaign, you focus on the campaign. You let the legal team handle these legal cases. And again, this I don't see this tracking with voters the way Democrats wished it would. In fact, we know that each time that they focus on this, President Trump has gotten more support. This is actually what unified early President Trump's Republican support. It was why other Republican candidates, when people were saying, is there some option other than President Trump? It was after the Mar-a-Lago raid. That was like it. People said, you know what? If this is what they're going to do to Donald Trump, we're going to unite behind him. And in fact, that stayed with him the entire primary.
Jordan, the other news that you were talking about, the Hunter Biden plea change here in Los Angeles. So for people that are just watching, there was supposed to be jury selection today.
Yeah.
That's why they were at court. The trial is about to begin, and there's now reports that the DOJ wasn't aware that the attorneys were going to go in for Hunter Biden and try to make this last-minute change. They were moments away from beginning jury selection. So prosecutors were there today prepared to start the proceedings with jury selection to move forward with trial, and now they're coming up with a kind of a switcheroo for the prosecution, and they're reporting that this is going to be an arrangement like an Alford plea, where it's a guilty plea on paper, but the defendant is acknowledging that they could be convicted, so they're avoiding trial, but not necessarily. They're saying they're guilty, but not necessarily saying they're guilty. A lot of people that listened to the Serial podcast back in the day heard much about the Alford plea back in those days. But do you see this, of the attempt to avoid the trial, as a way for Hunter Biden to get out of this soon, say I'm guilty, they hand down a punishment, and then Joe Biden can claim, whether he commutes a sentence or pardons him outright on his way out the door, I didn't interfere with the judicial system because I didn't interrupt a trial. I didn't stop the trial from happening.
Right.
This case was closed, and now I am going on my way out the door to pardon or commute the sentence of my son.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what's happening here. I think that's why you see the team probably surprising even the DOJ, accepting this kind of, putting forward this kind of plea deal. No, we have seen that a number of times. We are seeing that the DOJ didn't know about this plan at all. I think, sometimes, again, his legal team has got a totally new calculation. His father is not up for re-election, so you're not thinking that he's got to basically survive another few months. I think if Joe Biden was re-elected, he would have done this too very early after being re-elected. I don't think it would have changed the timeline that much, but it would have definitely caused some more political damage to Democrats, because he'd still be in office if he won. And, of course, the Democrats are up for re-election in the House, the Senate, places like that in a couple of years. So you'd have to keep talking about Hunter Biden. I actually think that was part of the calculation of removing Joe Biden. It was not just, I think it was mainly Joe Biden's performance. But on top of that, it was the distractions caused by his son and family members, including his brother, in these cases. And so now I think he's freed of a lot of those concerns, and those pardons are going to be issued. And you know what? We're going to be maybe mentioning them, or we might be so far away from that mattering that it's barely a mention in any kind of news, because it's just not relevant to the broader category of who is governing our country.